The night was dark and heavy with silence. Snow covered the streets and the wind cut like a knife. Shadows stretched across the narrow road, and the lights of the houses looked warm but far away. On that cold night, a woman walked alone, her steps weak, her breath white in the freezing air. She was not like the others in the city. Her skin had a faint glow, as if light lived under her veins. Her clothes were torn and thin, not made for this world's cold. Her eyes were large and bright, but now they were tired, filled with fear and hunger. She was not human, though from a distance one might mistake her for one. She had been walking for hours, her body shaking, her fingers stiff. Each house she passed felt like a small piece of safety, but each door was a test. She stopped at the first door, knocked with shaking hands, and waited. The door opened, and a man looked at her, his eyes narrowed at her strange glow. Without a word, he slammed the door shut. She stood still for a moment, then turned and walked away. The second door was no kinder. This time a woman opened it holding a blanket in her arms, but when she saw the strange figure before her, she gasped and quickly pulled the door closed, locking it. The alien woman whispered something soft, almost like a prayer, and kept walking. Door after door, she tried, 17 doors in total. At every one she was rejected, turned away, or feared. Some shouted at her, "Go away." Some closed the curtains without opening. Some children peeked through windows, pointing at her glowing skin. To them, she was not a guest, but a danger. A stranger too different to trust. Her strength was leaving her. Her legs trembled, and her glowing veins dimmed with every step. The snow pressed down on her thin shoulders, and her breath grew shallow. She hugged herself, trying to keep the last bit of warmth. Her mind whispered to her, "Stop. To rest, give up." But her heart kept her moving. She thought of her home, a world now lost. She thought of the stars, so far above her, hidden by clouds. She thought of the hunters who had driven her here, chasing her across the night sky. But most of all, she thought of survival. She could not stop, not yet. At the 17th door, she almost collapsed. The man inside had opened only halfway, taken one look, and shouted at her to leave. She had fallen to her knees on his steps, but he did not help her. Instead, he turned the light off, leaving her in darkness. Tears mixed with the snow on her face, and her body shook harder. Now, only one more house stood on the street. The 18th door, a small house with a weak yellow light glowing in the window. Her feet dragged as she moved toward it, every step heavy as stone, her eyes blurred, her body weak, and her breath thin. She reached the door, her hands barely able to lift. With the last of her strength, she knocked. The sound was soft, more a whisper than a knock. She leaned against the wooden frame, her forehead pressed to it. Her voice broke as she whispered one word. "Please." The house was silent for a moment. The wind howled behind her, biting at her skin. Her body slipped lower, and she thought this would be the end. 17 doors had closed against her, and she believed this one would close too. Her eyes shut halfway, her glow fading, her hope almost gone. But then, footsteps came from inside, slow but steady. The door creaked, opening just a little. A pair of human eyes looked at her through the crack, filled not with fear but with surprise. The silence held for a heartbeat, the world frozen in that moment. Would this human close the door like the others, or would he open it wider? She waited, heart faint, breath weak, body trembling on the edge of collapse. This was the 18th door, the last chance, the final thread of hope. Her fate now rested on the choice of one human. In the cold night, as snow fell heavier and the wind roared, the answer would decide everything. The wooden door of the small house opened wider. A man stood there, his hand still holding the edge of the frame, his eyes studying the strange woman who leaned weakly against it. He was an ordinary man, not rich, not powerful, but his heart was not ordinary. His name was Daniel, and though his life was simple, he carried a quiet strength inside. At first, he thought she was only another poor soul lost in the storm. But then he noticed the glow under her skin, soft and dim like fading fire. Her eyes shone with a light he had never seen in any human face. Her lips trembled as she whispered again, "Please," before her legs gave way beneath her. Daniel's first instinct was to step back, fear rising in his chest. She was not normal, not natural, and every voice of caution inside told him to close the door, lock it, and pretend he had seen nothing. But another voice spoke louder, the voice of kindness, of humanity, of something that could not ignore suffering. Daniel reached forward quickly, catching her before her body hit the cold ground. She was light in his arms, too light, as if hunger and cold had hollowed her body. Her skin felt strange, not rough, not smooth, but almost electric under his touch. Still, he did not let go. He pulled her inside, closed the door behind them, and lowered her gently near the fireplace. The warmth of the small fire painted her face in soft colors. She looked almost human now, but still not fully. Her glow returned slightly in the heat, her chest rising with shallow breaths. Daniel knelt beside her, torn between curiosity and caution. He whispered to himself, "What are you?" But the woman's eyes fluttered open before he foamed. And the courage to ask louder, she stared at him with a mixture of fear and relief. Her voice was weak, broken, but she tried to form words in human tongue. "Thank you," she said slowly, her accent heavy, her sound strange. Daniel blinked, surprised that she spoke his language at all. "You can talk," he said softly, and she nodded with effort. "Little words," she answered, her eyes closing again, exhausted. Daniel moved quickly, placing a blanket over her. He poured water into a cup and helped her drink. The warmth spread through her fragile body, and a faint glow pulsed once more beneath her skin. For a moment, Daniel only stared, unable to believe what he was seeing. He had read stories, seen movies, laughed at wild theories, but now one of them was breathing in his living room. An alien, a being from somewhere beyond the stars, was here, in his care. His heart pounded with questions. Where had she come from? Why was she here? What danger followed her? Yet he did not ask immediately. He looked at her trembling hands, clutching something tightly, a small crystal that shimmered faintly even in the firelight. Her fingers would not let it go, as if it was her last possession, her last reason to live. Daniel noticed, but chose not to take it from her. Instead, he spoke gently. "You're safe here, for now." The words seemed to calm her, and she whispered back, "Safe," trying the sound of it on her tongue. Her eyelids grew heavy, and soon she drifted into uneasy sleep. Daniel sat back, his mind racing, his eyes never leaving her. Every other person on the street had closed their doors, but he had opened his, and now, his home was no longer ordinary, his night no longer simple. He stood and walked to the window, peeking through the curtains at the snow-covered street. Everything looked quiet, but he could not shake the feeling that quiet would not last. If she was here, hurt and alone, then something or someone had driven her to this state. He thought of the fear in her eyes, the way she had collapsed, the way she whispered, "Please," as if the word carried her last hope. Danger must be near. Turning back to her, he saw her body twitch slightly in sleep, her face twisted with pain as if haunted by memories. The crystal in her hand glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her shallow breath. Daniel felt his chest tighten, torn between wanting to know the truth and wanting to protect her without question. He whispered to himself again, "What have I done?" But deep inside, he knew he had done the right thing. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence. The woman's glow spread gently, like embers finding life again. Daniel sat in the chair beside her, eyes heavy with fatigue but unwilling to leave her side. He thought of the 17 doors that had closed to her. He thought of the one he had opened, a choice so small, yet it felt like it carried weight beyond his understanding. The night dragged on, the storm outside howled, and shadows danced across the walls. Inside, 2 lives rested in the same room, one human, one not. Their meeting was a chance, but not an accident. The universe had brought them together, though neither understood why, and as Daniel finally closed his eyes for a moment of rest, he did not know that this choice would change not only his life, but perhaps the fate of the world itself. The storm outside raged through the night, but inside the small house the fire kept a soft circle of warmth. The strange woman lay on the rug close to the flames, her body wrapped in a blanket, her glow faint but steady. Daniel sat in the chair beside her, fighting sleep, watching every small movement she made. He had never seen anyone like her before, and now she was breathing under his roof. When morning light touched the window, she stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment she looked lost, as if she did not remember where she was. Then her gaze found Daniel, and she pushed herself up weakly. Her voice cracked. "You, human." Daniel nodded carefully, his face calm though his mind was full of questions. "Yes, I'm human," he answered. "You are not." She lowered her head, her glowing veins dimming for a moment. "I am not," she whispered, her words broken but clear enough. Daniel leaned closer, curious yet cautious. "Who are you?" She struggled to find the words, pointing at her chest. "Lyra," she said, her name trembling in the air. Then she placed a hand over the crystal she still held tightly, as if it was part of her soul. Daniel noticed how her fingers never loosened, not even in sleep. "That," he asked gently. "What is it?" Lyra shook her head, refusing to explain, her lips pressed tight, fear in her eyes. Daniel did not push further. He could see how fragile she was, how her body still shook with cold and weakness. Instead, he moved to the kitchen, poured a bowl of soup, and brought it to her. Lyra stared at the steam rising, then reached out slowly, her hands trembling. She sipped, her eyes closing as warmth spread through her, and for the first time, Daniel saw relief on her face. Better, she whispered, the words sounding strange in her mouth, but it carried a weight of gratitude. Daniel sat back, studying her carefully. Her skin was not like his. It caught the morning light in strange ways, shining softly as if made of crystal and flesh together. Her eyes were large and deep, filled with something beyond human experience, yet fragile, like a child lost in the dark. The more he looked, the more he wondered if he should be afraid, but his fear always softened when he saw the pain she carried. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the storm's fading. Lyra tried to stand, but her knees gave way and she collapsed back onto the rug. Daniel helped her, steadying her shoulders. "You can't leave yet," he said firmly. "You are too weak." She looked at him, her lips parting as if to argue, but instead she whispered, "Danger." Daniel frowned. "Danger to you?" he asked. She shook her head slowly, her eyes flicking to the window. "Danger to you?" His heart skipped. Something in her tone made the air feel heavy. Daniel wanted answers, but he also saw how much speaking cost her strength, so he waited, letting her breathe, letting her choose when to speak. As night approached again, Lyra finally began to explain in short words. She spoke of a place beyond the stars, a home that was no more. She spoke of hunters who followed her, cruel beings that would not stop. Her English was broken, but Daniel pieced the meaning together. She was not only lost, she was being chased, and the small crystal she carried was the reason. Daniel's eyes shifted to the glowing shard in her hand. "What is it?" he asked again, softer this time. Lyra's grip tightened, her voice low. "Life, memory, home." The way she said it made Daniel feel the weight of it, as if the crystal was more than stone, more than light. It was something sacred, something that must never be lost. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Daniel rubbed his forehead, trying to think. He had opened his door to a stranger, but she was no stranger anymore. She was something greater, something dangerous, something that tied his small life to the vast sky above. He wondered if he should regret his choice, if he should have shut the door like the others. But then he looked at her trembling hands, her tired eyes, her fragile body wrapped in his blanket, and he knew he could not regret it. Lyra watched him closely, as if wise, ting to see if he would cast her out, but Daniel only said, "You can stay, at least until you are strong again." Her lips trembled, and for the first time, she gave a faint smile. "Human. Different," she whispered, the words slow but honest. Daniel did not reply, but his chest felt heavy with the meaning. Later that night, as the fire dimmed, Daniel stood at the window once more. He saw nothing but snow and shadow, yet he felt eyes watching. He closed the curtain, his heart uneasy. Behind him, Lyra slept again, her hand still clutching the crystal, her faint glow painting the room in soft light. Daniel whispered to himself, "What have I brought into my home?" But deep inside, he already knew the answer. He had brought hope and danger, both walking together in the shape of a strange guest. The second night came heavy with silence. The storm outside had passed, but the air carried a different weight. Daniel could feel it in his chest, something unseen pressing on the small house. The strange woman, Lyra, sat close to the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames, her hands still wrapped tight around the crystal. Daniel sat across from her, restless, unable to ignore the questions burning inside him. He cleared his throat, his voice low. "Lyra, you said danger. You said they are coming. Who are they?" Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and full of fear. For a moment she stayed silent, as if deciding whether he deserved the truth. Finally she spoke in slow, broken words. "Hunters." Daniel leaned forward. "Hunters of what?" Her fingers tightened around the crystal until her knuckles turned pale. "Hunters of me." The fire popped, filling the silence between them. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Why you?" he asked. Lyra lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "Because of this." She lifted the crystal in her palm, the glow, pulsing like a living heart. Daniel's eyes widened. "It's just a stone," he whispered, but even as he said it, he knew it was not. The light inside the shard moved like liquid, flowing patterns that shifted and danced. It was not just a stone, it was alive. "This," Lyra said slowly, "is memory, is map, is home." Daniel frowned. "A map." She nodded weakly. "Map of my world, world destroyed, only memory left inside." Her voice cracked, her shoulders shaking. "They want it, to erase, to burn all that is left." Daniel's heart sank. He could hear the weight in her words, the pain of a world lost, the terror of enemies who hunted even memories. For a moment, he could not speak. The woman before him was not just a refugee. She was the last keeper of something greater than herself. The crystal was history, knowledge, and hope, and it was the reason she was dying in the snow while 17 doors shut against her. Daniel whispered, "If they find you, they find this. Lyra nodded, tears shining in her strange eyes. And Earth too. The words hit him like a hammer. What do you mean, Earth too? Daniel asked quickly, her gaze lifted, steady and full of sorrow. Hunters erase, not stop if they know humans help me. They erase you too. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Daniel leaned back, his heart racing, his mind screaming at him to throw her out, to let her danger pass by. But when his eyes fell on her shaking body, her fragile hands, and the glow of hope she still carried, he knew he could not. You should not have knocked, Daniel said softly, his voice shaking. Lyra lowered her head, whispering, I had no choice. Her words cut deep, because he knew they were true. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to trust, no more strength to keep walking. The universe had cornered her, and by opening the door, Daniel had stepped into her fate. For a long time, neither say, poke, the fire dimmed, the shadows grew longer, and the sound of the wind outside returned like a whispering voice. Finally, Lyra lifted the crystal, holding it between them. Do you want to see? She asked softly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Her eyes closed, her fingers brushed across the surface of the shard, and suddenly the light spilled outward. The small room filled with a vision. Stars stretched across the walls, galaxies spun in brilliant color, and a world appeared in the air like a ghost. It was blue and green, covered with oceans and forests, but unlike Earth, the forests glowed and the oceans shone like liquid glass. Daniel gasped, his mouth dry. That's your world, he whispered. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Was, she corrected, her voice breaking. Now, only memory. The vision shifted, and Daniel saw fire, destruction, cities falling, creatures fleeing, and ships burning in the sky. The crystal carried not only beauty, but tragedy, a record of all that had been lost. Daniel clenched his fists, his chest heavy with anger and sorrow that was not even his own. Lyra lowered the shard, the light fading, leaving only the fire's glow once more. Her body slumped, the effort draining what little strength she had left. But her eyes still held steady on him, searching for something. Now you know, she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly, his throat dry. Now I know. Silence wrapped around them again, but this silence was heavier. Daniel's mind raced with thoughts of hunters, of danger, of Earth being pulled into a war it did not know existed. Yet, in that storm of fear, one thought rose above all. He could not let her fall into the hands of those who hunted her. He could not close the door now. Lyra's breathing slowed, her body sinking back into exhaustion. Daniel covered her with the blanket again, his hands gentle. He stood by the window once more, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street. Shadows stretched across the snow, and in the distance, he thought he saw a flicker of strange light. His heart pounded. The hunters were closer than he wanted to believe. He let the curtain fall, whispering to himself, "What have I done?" But deep inside, another voice spoke louder, the same voice that made him open the door in the first place. It said, "What must be done?" And as the night deepened, Daniel realized that the secret revealed was not only hers, it was his too. Because now he was part of it, and there was no turning back. The night outside the small house was no longer silent. Daniel could feel it before he saw it, a pressure in the air, a vibration deep in his bones. Lyra stirred from her uneasy sleep, her eyes snapping open, glowing brighter than before. She whispered one word that made his blood run cold. "Hunters." Daniel moved quickly to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to look out. The street that had been quiet hours ago now flickered with strange lights. Shadows moved between the houses, tall figures with sharp outlines, their steps too smooth to be human. He counted 3 at first, then more, 6, maybe 7, spreading out like wolves on the hunt. Each carried a rod of dark metal that glowed at the tips, scanning the air as if tasting it. "They are here for you," Daniel said in a harsh whisper. Lyra nodded weakly, her hands clutching the crystal tighter. "Always find," she muttered. "Never stop." Daniel's throat tightened, his mind racing. He had a choice. He could give her up, open the door and point them to her, and maybe they would leave him alive. But when he looked at her, shivering with fear yet holding on to the shard of light, he knew he would never do it. His humanity would not allow it. "Come," he whispered, pulling her to her feet. She staggered, her body still weak, but she leaned on him as he guided her to the basement door. It was a small space, dark and cluttered, filled with old boxes and tools, but it was the only place she could hide. Daniel helped her down the steps, his heart pounding. "Stay here, no sound, no light," he told her firmly. Lyra grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. "They kill you." Daniel forced a small smile, though fear burned inside him. "Not if I'm careful." He closed the basement door softly and returned to the living room. The fire had burned low, shadows stretched long across the walls. Then came the sound. Heavy knocks on the front door, 3 strikes that shook the frame. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. The knocks came again, louder this time, shaking the small house. "Human," a voice called, deep and sharp, not like any voice Daniel had heard before. "Open!" Daniel swallowed hard, forcing himself to move. He opened the door halfway, his body blocking the inside. Outside stood one of the hunters, tall, armored in dark metal, its face hidden by a mask that glowed faintly. Behind it, 2 more scanned the street, their rods humming. The hunter leaned closer, its mask reflecting the faint firelight. "We seek one, small, weak, not of your kind." Daniel's heart raced, but his face stayed calm. "No one here," he said simply, his voice steady though his palms sweated. The hunter tilted its head, as if studying him. Its rod glowed brighter, sweeping past Daniel's chest. For a moment he feared it could read his heart, see his lie, but he stood firm, meeting the glowing mask without blinking. Behind the hunter, a neighbor's door opened slightly, a curious head peeking out. The hunter turned sharply, raising its rod, and the door slams. Ed shut in fear. Daniel used the moment. "You should leave. Nothing for you here." The hunter leaned closer, so close he could feel the strange cold radiating from it. Then it stepped back, slow and deliberate. "We search," it said. "If you lie, we return." Daniel closed the door slowly, locking it, his chest heaving as soon as the latch clicked. He leaned his back against the door, his whole body trembling. The hunters moved down the street, knocking on other houses, their strange light flickering across the windows. Inside, Daniel hurried to the basement, opening the door quietly. Lyra's eyes glowed in the dark, full of fear. "They go?" she asked. "For now," Daniel whispered, "but they'll be back." She lowered her head, her voice trembling. "Always back." Daniel sat beside her on the cold steps, his mind heavy. "What do they want with you, with the crystal?" he asked again. Lyra stared at the shard in her hand, her voice breaking. "They erase all history, all worlds, no memory left, only silence." Her words felt like knives. Daniel realized these hunters were not just after her, they were after the last piece of her world, the last proof it had ever existed. He clenched his fists, anger burning through his fear. "You're safe here," he said firmly, more to himself than to her. But even as he said it, the sound of the hunters outside reminded him that safety was fragile. Their steps echoed across the frozen street, their voices carried in the night, cold and sharp. Daniel knew they would not leave until they found her. The fire upstairs crackled weakly, but down in the basement the air was heavy. Lyra leaned against the wall, her glow dimming once more. She whispered softly, almost too quiet to hear. "Human. Brave." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time he saw trust in her strange eyes. Not fear, not sorrow, but trust. It made his chest heavy, because now he understood. He was no longer just hiding a stranger, he was standing between humanity and something far greater. Outside, the hunter's lights swept closer again. Daniel held his breath, listening to every sound. The game was not over, it had only begun. The night grew longer, the air heavy with fear. Daniel had not slept, his body tired but his mind sharp. In the basement, Lyra sat in silence, her crystal glowing faintly in her hands. Above them, footsteps echoed outside, the hunters still moving through the neighborhood, searching. Every knock on a distant door made Daniel's chest tighten. Every flicker of strange light through the curtains made his heart race. He knew they were getting closer, narrowing their search, sensing something different about his home. Still, he stayed calm, or at least he tried to. For Lyra's sake, he could not show fear. At dawn, the hunters returned to his door. The pounding was harder this time, shaking the wood. Daniel opened slowly, meeting their glowing masks with steady eyes. The leader stepped forward, its voice deep and sharp. "We know she hides." Daniel shook his head, his voice firm. "There is no one here." The hunter leaned close, scanning him with the glowing rod. Daniel could feel the heat of it against his chest. But he did not flinch. Behind the hunter, 2 others moved toward the side of the house. Daniel's jaw tightened. "If you break into homes, people will fight back," he warned. The hunter tilted its head, as if curious. "Humans weak," it said coldly. Daniel's voice grew hard. "Not all." Silence hung for a moment, then the leader stepped back. The hunter spread out again, knocking on more doors, questioning frightened neighbors. Daniel closed the door and locked it, his hands shaking only after it was shut. He hurried back to the basement, Lyra's glowing eyes waiting in the dark. "They know," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded. But they don't know enough. Not yet. Lyra lowered her head. You risk life for me. Daniel knelt beside her, meeting her strange eyes. Because it's the right thing. Her lips trembled. Humans. Different, she said again, this time with a soft smile. Daniel felt the weight of her trust settle on him like armor. For the first time, he realized he was not only protecting her, he was protecting something greater, a story, a history, a light the hunters wanted to erase. The day passed slowly, hunters circling the street, their shadows stretching across windows. Neighbors whispered in fear. Children pressed their faces to curtains, no one daring to step outside. Daniel stayed close to Lyra, planning, watching, waiting. When night came again, the hunters grew bolder. This time, they knocked not only on doors, but forced some open, stepping inside homes, their cold voices demanding answers. Daniel felt the pressure closing in. If they searched his home, it would all be over. He turned to Lyra, his voice low. If they find you, they will kill us both. She nodded, her glow faint. I leave, you safe. Daniel shook his head sharply. No, I will not hand you to them. If you go out there, they win. Her eyes widened, as if she could not understand such defiance. Why? She whispered. Because humans don't survive by surrender, he said, his voice strong. We survive by standing together. The words hung heavy, filling the small basement. Lyra stared at him, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, together, as if testing the sound. Daniel nodded, yes, together. Moments later, heavy knocks struck the door again, louder, faster. The hunters no longer patient. Daniel took a deep breath, steadying himself. He whispered to Lyra, stay hidden, no matter what. But she shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. No, I stand too. Daniel looked at her in surprise, her weak body trembling but her eyes burning bright. Yet he almost argued, but then he saw the determination in her face. For the first time, she was not only running, she was choosing to fight. The door above rattled as the hunters struck harder, the wood cracking. Daniel stepped to the stairs, ready to confront them. Lyra rose slowly, her glow brightening, the crystal in her hands pulsing with light. She whispered something in her own language, a vow Daniel could not understand, but he felt its power. Her eyes met his, and she said in broken English, not alone. The hunters burst through the door, their heavy steps shaking the floor. Daniel moved to block the basement entrance, his body shaking but his will steady. Leave this house, he shouted, his voice echoing. There is nothing for you here. The hunters raised their rods, the tips glowing brighter. Behind him, Lyra stepped forward, her glow spreading, filling the basement with light. For the first time, Daniel saw her not as weak or broken, but as something powerful, something alive with fire. The hunters froze for a moment, their masks reflecting the sudden blaze. Daniel glanced back, his breath caught. Lyra stood tall, her crystals shining, her eyes burning with strength she had hidden for too long. Together, they faced the threat, human and alien side by side. The hunters hissed, their voices sharp with rage. But Daniel felt no fear now, not with Lyra standing beside him. Stand together, he whispered, his voice strong. Lyra echoed softly, stand together. And as the hunters advanced, the glow of her crystal grew brighter. The fire in Daniel's heart burned stronger. The battle for survival had begun, not with weapons, but with courage, trust, and the choice to protect each other. The wooden frame of the house shook as the hunters forced their way inside. The floorboards creaked under their heavy steps, their dark metal armor glowing with faint red lines. Daniel stood at the top of the basement stairs, his fists clenched, his chest rising and falling fast. Behind him, Lyra's glow filled the darkness, the crystal in her hands pulsing brighter with every beat of her heart. The hunters spread out through the living room, their rods humming with strange energy. One of them stopped at the basement door, its mask tilting as if it sensed something below. The leader stepped forward, its voice cutting through the silence. Human, last chance, give her to us. Daniel swallowed hard, fear clawing at him, but he did not move aside. His voice came steady, though his body shook. She stays here. The hunter's mask leaned close, glowing faintly. You die with her. Daniel felt his chest tighten, but before he could reply, a stronger light flared behind him. Lyra stepped out of the shadows, her crystal blazing like a star, her body glowing with a strength Daniel had not seen before. Her voice rang out, trembling yet powerful. No, we fight! The hunters hissed, their rods snapping with red sparks. The leader raised its weapon, aiming at her, but Daniel moved first, throwing himself forward, shoving the rod aside. The weapon crackled against the wall, burning a hole through the wood, the smell of smoke filling the room. Daniel stumbled back, his arm aching, but he did not stop. He grabbed a broken chair from the corner and swung it hard, forcing the hunter to step back. At the same moment, Lyra lifted the crystal high, its light bursting outward. The entire basement glowed, the walls shaking as if the light carried weight. The hunters froze for a second, their masks flashing with strange symbols. Then they growled, charging forward together. Daniel's heart pounded, his every instinct screaming at him to run, but he held his ground. One hunter swung its rod, but Daniel ducked low, tackling it with all his strength. The impact threw them both against the wall, pain shooting through Daniel's ribs, but he refused to let go. He shouted with fury, a sound more human than any weapon. Lyra's voice rose behind him, chanting words in her own language. The crystal's glow grew brighter, beams of light shooting through the cracks of the small house. The hunters turned toward her, their attention shifting, sensing the true danger. Daniel gasped, struggling to his feet, blood on his lip. "Lyra, no!" But she shook her head, her eyes glowing like fire. "Yes, last choice." The crystal rose higher, the light blinding now. The hunters hissed, raising their rods, firing beams of red energy. Daniel dove forward, knocking one aside, the blast striking the floor instead of Lyra. The ground shook, wood splintering, dust filling the air. Through it all, Lyra stood tall, her voice unshaken. Daniel stumbled toward her, his body aching, his vision blurred. "Don't do this alone," he whispered. She looked at him, her face soft for a moment, and whispered back, "Not alone." The crystal exploded with light, a wave of pure energy rushing outward. The hunters screamed, their metal armor cracking, their glowing rods falling silent. The room shook as if the entire world trembled. Daniel shielded his eyes, blinded by the blaze. When the light faded, he looked up, his breath catching. The hunters lay broken across the floor, their masks shattered, their bodies still. But Lyra too had fallen, the crystal dim in her hands. Daniel rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. Her glow was faint now, fading like embers at the end of a fire. "No, stay with me," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. Lyra looked at him, her lips trembling with the effort to speak. "Crystal, safe," she whispered, pressing it into his hands. "Promise, keep it." Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. "I promise," he said, his voice shaking. She gave a weak smile. "Human, different." Her body grew still in his arms, the last of her glow fading into the darkness. Daniel held her close, his heart heavy, his chest aching with grief. For a long time the house was silent, the only sound his uneven breath. The hunters were gone, defeated, but the cost had been unbearable. He looked down at the crystal, its faint light pulsing slowly. It carried the memory of her world, the map of her people, the story she died to protect. And now it was his, a human's burden, a human's duty. Daniel rose slowly, his legs shaking, his arms still holding her. He laid her gently near the fire, covering her with the blanket she had once clutched for warmth. Outside, the first light of morning touched the snow. The neighborhood was silent, but Daniel knew this silence would not last. More hunters might come, more danger might follow, but he also knew something else. Lyra's last words echoed in his heart, human, different. And he understood what she meant. He was not chosen because he was strong, not chosen because he was special. He was chosen because he opened his door, because he chose kindness when others chose fear. That was what made humans different. That was what gave hope. Daniel looked once more at the crystal, its light steady in his hand. He whispered softly, "They will remember." And as the dawn spread across the sky, he knew the story was only beginning. The last choice had been made, but the future was still waiting.